Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NASCAR Pinty Series Power Hour here on GeForce TV. It is Cam K back with you. The season might be over, but there is still stuff to talk about. We've got a lot of stuff I want to dive into. Talking about next year, we've got our first look at the driver team chart for 2022. We'll take a look and see as to whether or not we can expect many changes there. We have some confirmations for the schedule for 2023 as well. And of course, we're going to dive into some interesting notes that I'd really like to get a vibe on from those who are watching along on GeForce TV. There's a lot of stuff that we can really do here. There's a good amount of NASCAR officials, NASCAR Pinty's people who tune into the show, who are aware of what we do here, that read suggestions, that read comments on our NASCAR Pinty Series community Facebook group. So whether or not you believe that people are tuning in, there is actually some truth here that people do. We've got Graydon Bunn, Jim Haynes in the chat. I'm very curious to start off with. This is going to be a bit of a hot topic here because I really wanted to start off this episode with talking about the paint schemes. And this is something that I think is actually a very good topic because it's going to tie into the Cup Series. It's going to tie into the NASCAR Pinty Series as well. So obviously we are here. We are fans of the NASCAR Pinty Series. We are fans of racing. But one of the things that we've done recently for the NASCAR Pinty Series Facebook community, it's our community page, run completely by fans and operated and posted by fans and people within the series. And it got me wondering about people's opinions on the paint schemes. And I think Cup Series is one of the biggest people one of the biggest places that we can talk about, because the paint schemes have been changed, because the numbers have been moved towards the front of the car from the traditional middle spot, and it's become mandatory. That is where you put your number. I'm very curious what people in the chat, people that are tuning in tonight, what their opinions are. Because in the NASCAR Pinty Series, we've actually been pretty lucky in that drivers and teams have pretty well free reign to run the number wherever they want on their race car. They can wear it, run it on the door like normal. They can run it towards the front. They can run it towards the quarter panel. You see some traditionalists that have always stuck to the number right in the right place, right under the door. But with the Cup Series being mandatory, I'm curious what people feel. Because in my opinion, we know that there is a reason for this. They believe that getting a little bit more exposure to the sponsor is what you're doing. Well, we've been doing this for many years now with the quarter panel numbers. I haven't seen a huge influx of sponsorship come into the series because of that. We saw K&N and ARCA do it for many years as well. Didn't really see a huge influx of sponsorship come in there either. The Cup Series didn't go that route, yet they made a move or a switch of where the number would be mandatory. Now, I'm of the belief that if your sponsor doesn't care, then you run it wherever the hell you want. Now, for some reason, the Cup Series has decided that you have to run it at this specific area. I'm very curious to see what other people believe, because if it's me, there's no argument here. If the sponsor wants to pay extra or it will only pay to be on your race car because they got the entire side of the car, then I understand it. But if they are still going to shell the exact same amount that they were going to originally, and there is no change, then why make it mandatory? You have NASCAR Canada, which I think does it. Again, we've been very well known of doing things right. Sure, there's definitely a lot of things that they still do wrong. But one thing I think that they do really good here is that they allow drivers and teams to control where their numbers are. It is not a mandatory set right away. Now, do I think it makes a huge difference? It's hard to say, because if we wanted to go really unique here, you go the V8 Supercar Series and you use the rear window and you put the number there and you use the entire side of the car for your sponsorship. But the reality is, this hasn't made any difference. It really hasn't, at least not here. Now, in the Cup Series, I think it can be done well. We've seen some beautiful paint schemes, great marketing opportunities. I'll take a perfect example of that number one car for Ross Chastain this past weekend with the Kubota logo. That traditionally probably wouldn't fit over the rear tire. That wouldn't have fit. But at the end of the day, there's a couple things. If the Cup Series is going to continue doing it this way, I think you got to make it a little bit more like here, which is allow teams to do whatever the heck they want. If a sponsor wants it and the team agrees, do it that way. But don't make it mandatory. It makes no sense to make it mandatory. Because they took an amazing concept, and it was the throwback weekend. That's an amazing idea. But you're not throwing back to what the schemes were. You're throwing back to a made up mumbo jumbo scheme with a number in a different position. It's taken some what would have been really, really cool paint schemes, nice throwbacks, and it didn't make it throwback at all. It makes it unique. It's its own thing. Mike Russell says, I like it towards the front tire for sponsor availability. I would say that, Mike, you have a point in that there is room for sponsorship there. But at the end of the day, that's not making as huge of a difference as, say, if you were to put it on the quarter panel where they get the entire door to put it, right? Across the entire side. The Cup Series, I think, of course, is shown that it doesn't matter if you move the number up. Teams just don't know how to paint cars sometimes. I mean, Graydon and I had this conversation a while ago talking about JTG Doherty's horrible use of the space on the side of the car. And of course, that was the reason you were supposed to move the number up, was supposed to have more room. Yet it didn't make any difference. Alice is looking at some of the cars. It looks like leave a larger sponsor spot. Yeah, we're leaving a larger sponsor spot, but again, if they're not coming, what's the sense of making it mandatory? If you get a sponsor, let's take perfect example of WeatherTech on LP Dumoulin's car. Could WeatherTech go back to a traditional look? Absolutely they could. If they're going to keep sponsoring because they get the full side of the car, am I going to say that they have to change that? No. But I think we've seen that you go back traditional and it looks just as good. Maybe even better. DJ Kennington this year is in the running for the best paint scheme on our Facebook community page right now. Easily one of the best looking paint schemes this year. Would it look the same if the 17 was moved forward? Now, obviously, the major differences on the Cup cars now is that the contingency panels are pretty well nothing. They don't have really much any contingencies anymore. So you have that room to move them forward. I think if you take a look at Kevin Lacroix, I think his plan is to move the 74 as close to the front as possible to make it look exactly like Chase Elliott's car. Now, where people might not agree with the way Kevin races, Kevin is a very, very smart businessman, and he knows that the more similar it looks to a Cup car, the more attention it's definitely going to get. Mike Russell says, and being able to put more than one sponsor on the side because NASCAR is all about being uniform with the way they do. It's true. It's true. I don't agree, though, that being uniform is the way to go. Not with the small series like NASCAR Pinty Series. Obviously, I agree with that. But the Cup Series, let's be honest, they're not crawling with sponsors. I mean, the reality is there's some teams that are doing very well this year. I'd say Trackhouse is doing an amazing job at securing new sponsorship. It's been very obvious that they've been able to do that. It's not an easy thing to do in 2023, that you're going to come in next year and you're going to have one partner all the way through. That's just not how it's going to be anymore. There's a major shift in the way that sponsorship has been in the Cup Series, in racing in general. And I'm curious whether or not, and this is where it kind of leads into our first topic here, which is the schedule for 2023. We talked about it last week, about potential racetracks that you could be going to. And one of the things that was very interesting to me was that Tony Spiteri, when he was interviewed, I believe this was his interview with Caitlin Patrick, where he mentions that they're aiming to get the 2023 schedule out by the end of November. Now that gives a lot more time to the teams to be able to secure sponsorship for next year. With the schedule starting a release earlier, not January, not February, certainly not March, like what we saw. Teams need this time to be approaching companies for next year's budget. This is the time. In fact, it was probably a month or so ago that they start to work out their budgets for next year. Maybe the way that they need to start looking at it is we got to sell race per race sponsorships. Go the Cup Series route. I think that there's a reality that people want to get sponsored for the whole season, but that's just not reality now. The amount of money that these guys have to put into a single race is absolutely outrageous to ask a sponsor for, especially when you don't have the product being put on a nationwide platform live on television. Sure, it is on streaming. Not everybody has access to it. Not everybody is with TSN. So there's downfalls to it for sure. But one of the things that we as fans can definitely do is say, oh, well, we know that one thing is very going to be very rare here, and that's the weather techs, the Castrolls. I mean, Napa's a little bit different with Kevin because Kevin that's a business deal there. But you're not going to find year-long sponsorships on a regular basis. I mean, it works for some guys like Tagliani, who put forth a product, who benefits. He knows how to make his sponsorship worth it. And every time you see him, he's plugging something. He's also got business ventures now. Tony makes a lot of sense here because planning is also going to go a long way now. If you know the schedule in November, you have a lot more time to plan out your season, planning out crew members, planning out your trips, getting flights, getting everything prepared. If you are like a Jamie Hackinson at EHR and you say are in charge of operating and running an organization that has 3 to 4 cars, trying to get travel arrangements, hotels, schedules all booked out for their team members, it's not an easy thing to do. But now all of a sudden you have this stuff at your leisure a lot earlier. It means that gives a lot more time for people out in Eastbound Park, for people out west, for people out at Oshweekend to find rides. It's going to make things it's going to make it a lot longer of a season because it means, sure, it's their off season, but it means your work is going to start as soon as the season's over. And that's the way it really needs to be. I think that's when we kind of shut down and everything goes quiet, it hurts the series a lot because you lose any momentum that you had. Obviously, you're excited when the spring comes and everything's back to normal. You get to go racing again. But the reality is you can't go quiet. That's why we run this show during the off season, because we need it. As much momentum as we can bring about the NASCAR Pinty Series. Actually, there's some comments here. I just want to make sure I get to them here. On dirt cars, they have been towards the front and the rear and a lot centered, but no idea why NASCAR regulates number placement as manual scoring. That's true. Ended in a world I'm not sure what you're saying there, but a long time ago. Well, it's true. Electronic scoring is the way to go. So really, you don't need to have numbers in a specific spot. That's the truth. GB, this is one of the best moves ever, aligned with fiscal calendars. It needs to be that way. You don't have companies pumping in tons of money on a regular basis to this series. You need to move things so that they align with companies, not the other way around. And I think that's one of the biggest things that Tony is going to bring to this, is that he's got such a good business sense. He knows this does not make sense. Companies won't align their calendar to match yours. That's not how it works. We need to be basically working to try and get companies on board now and give it lots of time. That's the other thing too. Last year was really tough getting the schedule so late, and I'm not faulting anybody there. That is It's tough. I mean, that is not an easy job to do it, but I think the reality is, I think what, and I'm not 100% sure if somebody is in the chat that is aware. I believe what's happened is that they've taken the role that was run, the series director has kind of been moved. There's two different areas now. There's the marketing aspect of it, which is going to be handled by Tony as GM of NASCAR Canada. And then you're going to have the actual series director who will handle all the changes, the day-to-day operations. I would expect. But this is an amazing first move because, again, we know the reality of racing in Canada. It is extremely tough. But we do know that there are some confirmed races for next year already. Okay? Now, we have a couple. All right? So the way that it looks right now, don't worry about the paint scheme challenge. We'll talk about that in a second. So, as you see here, Loretta Thiering, who is one of the owners at Edmonton International Raceway, did confirm to me on Facebook that they signed a 2-year contract in 2022, and that includes the 2023 season. So that means the NASCAR Pinty Series is returning out west to Edmonton. I can't imagine that you're going to go out west and only go to Edmonton. There's a lot of question, though, as to where else you go. There's been a lot of talk about wanting to go out to BC. I know people talk about going out to Penticton. Somebody was mentioning, Nick Menton was mentioning that. You also had Area 27, which was one of the biggest investments that we've seen. Now, RS1 is out west. RS1 has similar cars to the NASCAR Pinty Series. Not only that, it does have a luxurious facility that would fit very well with NASCAR Pinty Series. Beautiful racetrack. Could we see something with a alignment or partnership with RS1? Maybe. I think getting a series together like RS1 to be similar of the NASCAR Pinty Series West is not entirely out of the possibility. I think Tony mentioned it again in his interview that there's opportunities to do championships within the championship. So a Western championship is entirely possible. Whether that's through a different series, I don't know. But there's options that you go out to a Western race at Edmonton, you have the 2 races at Sutherland, and you add another race at maybe Penticton. Solid Western trip. Now, obviously, this means expansion of either the schedule or it means retraction of some certain racetracks. I'm not really a fan of going one side of the country to the other because we know that the reality is a lot of these teams are centered in Ontario and Quebec. That's just the reality. That's where the cars come from. A lot of the drivers are from Quebec. A lot of the drivers from Ontario. It's very hard to get people into the series if they're spending so much right off the bat. And the reality is they are. Let's take a look at this schedule right now. We already know that there's a set schedule with Ohsweken. There's 3 years. We know that they're going to be back this year, at least another year after that. Same with Eastbound Park. The investment is a little bit lower the next 2 years at Eastbound Park, but based off of the reaction from Atlantic Canada, I do not expect that we're going to see them go away at all. That was a really successful event. GP3R has already posted their 2023 dates, and of course Edmonton has already posted there as well. Now, obviously, possible returns. These are pretty likely. There's not really a track on here that I really am not sure would be returning or would not be returning. There's obviously CTMP, 2 of the highlights of the season, great races at that track. I don't see that going away. Delaware, I don't see going away either. Everything else, I don't know because I'm not as familiar with Chaudière. I love that racetrack. I think it's one of the best races of the year. I would think that that's pretty safe too. NASCAR home tracks typically are the ones that stick around. So you got iCar as well. If it were me, I would pass on iCar to go somewhere else in Quebec. Obviously, there's been talks, lots of rumors for many years about tracks trying to get NASCAR to come there. So I'm obviously, I don't know about Sunset Speedway. I don't know about Toronto. I don't know about Sutherland. I think Toronto was a very, very solid expansion. What a great idea to have them headline the Friday and actually have their race for free. A lot of people stayed on the Friday afternoon to stay for the race. So that was a really solid idea for the folks at NASCAR to do that. I would expect that stays. I don't see why they would want to leave. That Sutherland, of course, 2 races out there. Good contingent of Western drivers. Just a couple, but it was good enough to have it. We had a really successful car count all season long. So to all these racetracks on here, I really don't see anything that is immediately not something we're going to see. Now, I've added some names we say unlikely to be added. These are for future or current. Likely, we're never going to see these guys on the schedule. I did remove Ducasse off this list just because it is still questionable. It's closed, but it's not sold, so it's still there. I think a lot of people hope that we'll eventually see somebody step up and hopefully purchase it, open it back up again. That would be great. Sauble, Peterborough, Flamborough. I've been told by people within the series that's not likely. More or less, I would think size, the facility itself, maybe just not up to what they'd be looking for. And then Mont Tremblant I've added because a lot of people actually brought that up in a poll last year. And actually they've got noise restrictions there. So that is unlikely to happen if there's noise restrictions. I believe Sauble might have some as well. So that unfortunately means that those tracks would probably not be on there. However, there are 3 names here that are rumored or that are interested. Now, one that won't go away is Riverside. Riverside has been the track that most people on the Stickers and Scuffs podcast that have been in the NASCAR Pinty series have said to us, that's the track that I want to return. They quote it as a Canada's Bristol. I agree 1,000% that this track should be back. I think that there's definitely a want for it to be back. At the end of the day, it does come down to money. And if they can find a sponsor out there that will help support Riverside Speedway, I don't think that there's any question that they take that when they go out to Eastbound Park and make it some sort of a double header weekend. I don't see how that's a bad decision. The problem was when we did go out to Riverside for many years, the car count started to get really small, and there was times we had, I think, 13, 14 cars out there, and it's tough. It's absolutely tough. I would love to see them out there. Riverside is one of my favorite racetracks in Canada. I think it is a bucket list track for myself and Graydon. We both want to go. And I think if you're going to do that, somebody from like 2 guys from Ontario are more likely to go out to Atlantic Canada if you're going to have 2 races in a couple of days than 1. Make it worth the while. Then you can also probably attract some pretty big names. Austin McDonald, the Butcher brothers, just to name a few. Obviously, Sarah Thorne would definitely be somebody you'd want to see back. You've got good talent out in Atlantic Canada, so definitely those are options there. And as far as my understanding is, a lot of the series really likes Riverside. They really like the ownership group, so hopefully that happens. Another track that I know is wanting to be on board is Montmagny. I love this racetrack. I haven't been to it. I've watched a couple of races that have been streamed, and it is a good racetrack. It is. I can't really say that I can compare it to really anything. It reminds me actually of in a way like St. Eustache, because it has a not really a wall on the outside of turn 1 and 2, if I'm remembering correctly, and it has that bit of a runoff, just like St. Eustache had. I believe it's bigger and it's got banking. So, what would you turn that away, right? So Montmagny, and then the dirt track out in Granby in Quebec. You've got one dirt track in Ontario. I think you definitely would get a lot of interest from the dirt racing community in Quebec. So, we've got a solid list here of potentials, of possible returns. Like I said, I don't expect any that are not going to be back, but you never know. We really don't know what's going to happen with tracks year to year, and we want to make sure that people continue to be involved in the series as much as possible in the off season. That's why, of course, on the NASCAR Pinty Series community Facebook page, join us and you can participate in the 2022 Paint Scheme Challenge. You can vote on your favorite paint scheme throughout the years in head-to-head battle. We've got a bracket challenge right now. We're working our way through the first round. You don't see every single driver on here. It'd be a little bit hard to get every single one. It would take too long, and people would kind of probably fall apart in terms of their interest. But let's take a look here. We got Glenn Stiers and Brian Cathcart was our first round. Glenn Stiers will move on to round number 2. Brent Weller and Brett Taylor. Brent Weller in the rigid Ryobi car moves on. JP Bergeron and Rafael Lessard and Courtemanche. In round number 1, it was JP Bergeron that defeats EHR. Back-to-back EHR defeats. Daniel Bois and Alex Tagliani. This was a close one, but Bois pulled it off. The 66 and 92, Dexter Stacy and Wallace Stacy, they got similar paint schemes, so we grouped them together. Versus Larry Jackson, the Stacys will move on to round number 2. So an EHR does move on. Then we got a battle of 22 racing with the young guns of Trayton Lapsovich and Kyle Steckley. Trayton Lapsovich wins with the FBM car. DJ Kennington and Ken Schrader. This one wasn't really close. It went to DJ Kennington. Gary Clute and Sam Fellows. Gary Clute. This was a close battle, actually, between the two of them. LP Montour, Ray Morneau. Ray Morneau destroyed in this round. Absolutely destroyed. Donald Teague and LP Dumoulin. This was a very, very close battle. Donald Teague just steals the win away. Jean Paillet and Alex Gannett. Alex Gannett pulled off a upset of sorts against the Paillet team. Then it was Kevin Lacroix against Kevin Lacroix, the EASR colors versus the Napa. Napa won handily. And then lately it was our Serge Bordeaux versus Simon Dion Vienne, and it was Simon Dion Vienne that took the win. At last count, Mark Dilley would defeat Dumoulin Competition, meaning there will not be 2 of the 3 Dumoulin Competition cars in round number 2. Of course, you see the 04 still to come. Be taking on Aaron Turkey in the Nitro 54 variety car. So that is going to be a really good battle. Of course, you can vote each and every day until we get a winner for 2020. I haven't decided what's going to happen if they do win. It's probably nothing. But we'll move on here. I just got a couple of comments here from Jim Haynes. Jim, the biggest thing to keep the purse affordable for the tracks, NASCAR ruined the truck series by jacking it up way too high. Richmond, Virginia purse was $500,000, or was it $500? So it went away as it was too hard to find. Granby looks to always have a great fan base. Definitely does. Huge fan base when I see it on Flow, and it's wide enough, which is a must. That's very true. It's a very good racetrack. Very good racetrack. The other thing that, again, the key word here, Jim, it's a NASCAR home track. That always attracts NASCAR. Same with Eastbound Park. It's a NASCAR home track. So you definitely have something to look at when you're out there, for sure. So we look into our 2022 driver and team chart. Now, this is something that we are going to continue to work on all season long. J-Ski does an amazing job with the NASCAR Cup Series and the NASCAR, really across the top 3 divisions. But we needed one for the NASCAR Pinty Series. Not that we're expecting a ton of changes, but you'll see scrolling through is the information from last year. Jim Haynes says, it is always a individual taste thing, but I do think the Pi team cars look great. Jim, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to go back and take a look at Mark Antoine Cameron's car from 22 Racing a couple years ago and tell me it's not the exact same. Looks exactly the same as a couple years ago. I did see a couple different renderings, and they didn't go with the scheme that I thought would look really nice. It was a really, really good one. So I hope they do change it up this year. It could be just a branding thing, but I would like to see a little bit more red on those cars because it's a really nice red. Jeremy Smith says, has anyone heard rumors that the FIA has approved blueprints for a road course in Ontario? Yes, Jeremy, that is the Oro Medonte test track. As far as I know, it's a BMW test track. I don't know if there's going to be actual racing on it, but as far as I know, it is just a test track for right now. The cost was $500,000 to put a truck race when it went away. Put on a truck race. Yeah, that's a little ridiculous. Terry Dewey, our man from EHR, is in the chat now to join us for the evening. Obviously, there's a lot that we can look forward to for next year. If you got Nalo running through the shot here. But there was a lot of change that happened throughout the season. Obviously, we had a lot of names that were intending on a full season. It didn't end up happening for everybody. We do have a good group of drivers. Obviously, this year was remarkable in terms of what we got. We had a record towards the end, or at least tied a record 28 cars, or 26 cars I think we ended up with. 26, 27, maybe in 28 at Delaware Speedway. We were going to have even more. Didn't end up having everybody that was originally planning on coming, but we take a look at the driver and team chart that's rolling through the screen right now. And of course, it is something that we'd like to see a bit more. Yeah, Jeremy Smith comments here saying, talking about paint schemes, I'd like to see more throwback schemes in the series. I know teams aren't swimming in money. They really aren't. But it would be cool to see a Peter Gibbons throwback. Absolutely, I agree. It'd be even cooler to see Canadian Tire come on back, and then you could definitely do it right. So GB breaking the news here saying Subaru has already done an off-road challenge on the roughed-in track in Oro Medonte. So it's a solid start. I think Oro Medonte is an area that you're definitely going to be looking at if you want to be able to run a race. We know that tracks like Calabogie, Shannonville aren't usable right now. Noise restrictions definitely have a role in that. I believe actually out in Oshawa, if I'm not mistaken, there's a test track out there for GM that I don't know if they're even close to even being able to run a race out there, but there's options out there. But doing something where it's actually at manufacturer facility would actually be pretty good for the series, trying to get interest back in. Jeremy, you know what? I agree with you. I think that because they cut ties, Canadian Tire did cut ties with Hockey Canada, as did Tim Hortons. I think naturally coming back to the NASCAR Pinty Series would be the way to go. Canadian Tire has invested a lot of money in racing, especially with Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Why not? Sam Fellows is here. He is in this series. Ron Fellows, they've got that connection to Canadian Tire already. I think, Sam wants to move up. I think Canadian Tire, you bring them back to where they were champions with Scott Steckley. 22 Racing, maybe a solid fit for him. I'm not suggesting that he ditch or move on from Jim, but if there's an option there, I think he takes it. Canadian Tire definitely would be an option for me if I'm NASCAR. You hear that they're moving on from Hockey Canada, you take that opportunity to make some calls. Tony would do it, absolutely. And they're not completely out of the realm of the series because they did sponsor a couple of races in 2020, 2021. MotoMaster had come on board as a contingency sponsor for the series a couple years ago. So there is definitely options there. But I think we can look at this field right here and go, okay, we have some solid pieces here. Now, hold on, folks, because this is a take right here. I don't feel that we need any more support from Quebec in terms of the series. The series has solid footing from Quebec. Has a lot of support. Where we need this support? Western Canada, Atlantic Canada, and Ontario. Now, we finally got to see some amazing runs by some young Ontario drivers in the series this year. Obviously, Trayton Lapsovich is already here. But Brandon Watson, Jake Sheridan, Ray Morneau Jr., Kyle Steckley. Do I need to say more? Evident that the talent is there. You bring in a couple more of those names. J.R. Fitzpatrick. Yeah, he's still young. Crazy as it is to say, J.R. Fitzpatrick is still young. Could very well come back into this series and be a champion at any point. He could. The reality is, Ontario has been getting its butt kicked by Quebec for years. Quebec drivers are lucky because they have some great partners. That's the reality. Great partners, great supporters out in Quebec. You've got guys like Martin D'Anjou who focuses so much on getting the product out there. Commits weekly about motorsports in Quebec. They've got tons of racetracks, tons of people that are involved in motorsports. Well, Ontario, we're late to the party there. I think the reality is it's still in a certain section of Ontario. It's not as widespread. Now, where corporations come in, that's the hardest part. We don't have major corporations coming into the series right now. We need that. We do. There's some great partners out there that I bet you have no idea this series exists. None. I will give you a perfect example. Christopher Bell had a Canadian corporation on his race car this past weekend. We've seen Austin Hill with Canadian corporations on his car. Ty Gibbs with Canadian corporations. Brandon Jones. It makes you sick when you think about it. Why? Because those are all Toyota teams. Where is the Toyota influence? Where's the Toyota investment in Canada? Whether or not we need a team to pony up some money to try and get Toyotas into the series, there's an option there that could be an untapped gold mine. I'm not suggesting that that is where everything is. That's not true. The problem is right now, as I just want to switch to Terry's point here, that we need more of our Ontario drivers to get road course experience. How? Terry? That's the hard part. Really, the Pinty Series is the only one that goes around to the road courses. They're going to have to pick up and go karting. They're going to have to pick up and go open wheeling, sports car racing. There's not options. The Ontario Sportsman Series, the APC Series, the Superstock Series, they don't go road course racing. So the hardest thing for an Ontario driver to do is to get road course racing in a stock car. There's no options. How are they supposed to do this? You can't start in the NASCAR Pinty Series for your first ever road course race and expect to be successful. Now, there are some guys who've picked it up very well. You got to test, obviously. It's all money. I think when you see the reality of it setting in, Terry, is that there is a huge lack of road course racing for stock cars for Ontario drivers. It's kind of hard for them to pick it up if they don't get the opportunities. Now, obviously, they've got some great people within the series that can help them. Andrew Ranger, LP Dumoulin, JF Dumoulin, Daniel Bois, Malcolm Strawn. There are so many great road racers that can do it, that can train, that can help. Sam Fellows, obviously Ron Fellows. Driving experiences at CTMP. There are all sorts of options. We want this field to continue to grow in the years. So it's going to need faces from Ontario. It's going to need faces from Western Ontario, Western Canada. It's going to need faces from Atlantic Canada. Trying to get corporations to send some money out is going to be hard. It is. It's about the ROI, return of investment. You cannot have everybody rely on Quick or Pinty's. That's not fair to those corporations. It's not fair for them to spend all that money and not get what they put into it. You have to make it worth it. So one of the things that's going to need to happen is NASCAR.ca needs a complete overhaul. I don't fault the social media team for the NASCAR Pinty Series at all. They do an amazing job covering as much as they can. The problem is that you have a site that's not operated by people within the series. It is unacceptable in 2022 that the grid is not updated, that information is not held on the site itself. It's held in an external site. That's a problem that Tony, I'm sure, is going to fix. The social media team knows what they're doing. I can't talk enough about how friggin' good Caitlin is at her job. She's got limitations. She's so good. The series is so good to have her there. She knows how to do the job and to do it well. She's got some good people that she can train, that she can bring up to join if they want to make that investment. There's a lot of people that can help out with a website. Lots of people. From Ryan Dyson in the APC Superstock team to team members to Kilton Inc., which is a sponsor of OSS. There's a lot of people out there. That is unacceptable. As Tony said, timing and scoring, that's unacceptable. So we're at a checklist here. Well, we're tackling things that companies are going to look at and go, why is my company not featured on your website as a sponsor of this team? I'm putting in thousands of dollars sponsoring this race team, and there's no company logo here. There's no link to their social media. There's no link to a website. There's no merchandise. These are all small things. And we know in his conversation with Caitlin, Tony hit on everything. He said, don't look at what they say, look at what they do. It's true. It's not going to be overnight. That's the biggest thing that is going to be the hardest thing for fans like myself to be able to hold on to. It's going to be, okay, trust. Trust in what they do, not by what they say. You've got people now that care. Not saying the old regime did not care. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But when you have a series like this that's not run from people up here, that's a problem. It makes no sense at all. Now, we've met people from NASCAR International that love this series. They love it. They know that we have a gold mine here. I'm not going to say that this is... It is disrespected so much by comparing it to ARCA. It is not ARCA. It is far from ARCA. Yes, we sometimes have cars that are slow, drivers that are brand new, drivers that have no experience, drivers that just have a lot of money. That is everywhere. What we can do is continue to promote this series, continue to talk about it all season long, bring our ideas forward. Bring them forward, because these corporations that are on these cars deserve the attention because they put forth this product for us. These drivers and teams, the racetracks, they would not be able to put on the show that they do without those that sponsor them. And I'm hoping that we can get to a point where the costs are lower so that we can see some guys like a Matthew Scannell take that step to a full-time effort. So we can actually see how much talent is there. We know that the talent is there. There's a lot of it. I mean, look at the runs by Kyle Steckley, Jake Sheridan, Ray Morneau. Ray had a tough deal in his first go of it, but he was 10th quickest in his first qualifying. That doesn't happen. When you look at, and this is the biggest comparison, if you look at the Cup Series, how often is it that a rookie comes up and is that good? I mean, Jake Sheridan went up to the top 3 on dirt, first time on dirt, in Mark Dilley's car, wasn't supposed to be in that race. Then he comes into Delaware and goes all the way up to the top 5 before being spun. And contained himself. Because, Lord, I would have been pissed. And I'm sure he was. I got a couple of content. Here we go. Jim, Jacusta's closed for what reason after they spent all the money to fix it up? Owner passed away. They don't have anybody to take it over. It's operating costs, man. You got to have somebody that's going to pay to run it. I think you have to give your new leadership some time to get things to get some of these things going, as NASCAR being charged could have been directing cash for Cup, which is what they care about. It's absolutely true. But if there's somebody that's going to vouch for this series about what we need financially, it would be Tony Spiteri. The other thing, though, that's big, too, is this is a crucial offseason for them to go to work hiring and getting new companies interested as contingencies, as race sponsors, bringing them in. And in whatever way we can do that, we're going to keep doing it. They may have to go to and do club racing at CTMP. Good idea. And ICAR, I agree, but half of our schedule is road course. It's true. We are all for Ontario drivers. We need to develop more time. Comparing series would sure help. Terry, that's what we're trying to do here. It needs it. Now, from what I've been told by other drivers, APC Series is not that. It can't be because they're not as comparable. Super Stocks, I've heard they're a little bit more comparable. Again, I'm always going to vouch for Ontario Sportsman Series because that was what it used to be. They were a companion series with NASCAR or before NASCAR with CASCAR. Good point. Graydon, Caitlin Patrick, absolutely. Gratitude all the time because she's literally always running all over the place. Her and Joel definitely need those shoe sponsorships. Awesome women, impressed with Jake, absolutely. I want to see him back. Ray Morneau is to Delaware, Dale Jr. was to Talladega. 1,000% great, and that's why we need these names. You got rid of all the hometown names, right? They moved on or they retired, and we just didn't have anybody there. This is going to work out. ARC is a 95% young ride buyers until they muff and move out of money. 100%. Mostly racing service teams for hire. Yep. That's exactly it. It's a pipeline for you to waste your money, get up to Cup Series or Xfinity or Trucks and realize you don't actually have the talent. And then your money gets cut off and you're SOL. Really. That's reality. Agreed. We need a series that puts them on road courses. That's going to be the toughest thing, man. Because everything else that I know of that would go on a road course is expensive. Production cars. Now, I don't know the reality of the cost of it, but maybe the Nissan Challenge, because they're all road courses. Yes, a lot of Quebec races, but maybe those races out at CTMP running. I don't know. It's a tough problem, right? There really isn't a stock car series that they could do that, and there really isn't, unfortunately, stock cars. There's not enough of them to do it. The biggest series that would do it, honestly, would be RS1. If they were going to be able to expand, absolutely RS1 would be the choice. JP Bergeron got some road course experience by going out to RS1 out in BC, but again, I don't know how much money that investment's going to be. It's a better investment for the Western drivers for sure. I think Jason White, we saw that this year, that it paid off better for him. The Dowlers being out there. I think I wouldn't be shocked if Brett Taylor goes to that series and runs a couple more. Maybe he runs a full season. It's definitely a place that we can see growth. In terms of companions, that's where you'd go. I think OSS on your short tracks. And then ultimately RS1, but it's all the way out west. So you got to make decisions here as to what other options we have. We really don't have a ton of options. And that, unfortunately, is part of the problem. So we can continue to try and hope, but I think that the amount of talent that we have in Ontario, the amount of talent we have in Quebec is very evident. There's definitely talent out in Western and Atlantic Canada as well. It's just, unfortunately, it's a lot harder, I believe, to get the investment out there. We don't have regular racing, I don't think, from this series. I mean, it's been a long time since BC has seen a NASCAR race. Obviously, since Sun Valley closed down, I guess it was known as Motoplex. But when it did close down, I think the Western races out of Calgary and in Edmonton and at Sutherland are in Saskatoon are solid. Manitoba, I'm not sure if there's a track out there for Manitoba. Let's see. Everything has gone through the roof, but the fuel prices that for team travel is a torpedo in team budgets. You know what, Jim? One of the things that I would love to see the series just do is try and get a company that will help them with gas. Canadian Tire, I would love to see a Canadian Tire gas card award at the end of every race to the team with, I don't know, GB, even OSS dirt cars are set up for left turning. Yeah, they are. And many of the teams aren't in the market, not even close, to buy another race car for what road course racing chassis are worth. Yeah. Karting or dirt is the next closest thing. That's kind of it. I mean, karting is kind of the cheapest method. And I don't really know if that's the best option, but we're going to have to wrap it up for this episode 21 of the NASCAR Pinty Series Power Hour. Here on GeForce TV. Of course, we'll be back next week. We'll talk more about this because the conversation, this is why I want to keep running this, is to build our audience and build chatting with everybody. I really enjoy getting to chat about this series with everybody, and we can continue to try and put our heads together on ways we can improve and things we can continue to relay and hope for. I think that's the fan base is going to continue to get stronger if we can build this into a weekly thing that people want to tune into, and we'll get some interviews hopefully and get people on here. I definitely agree that we can definitely see some more of this each and every week. But of course, if you haven't already, make sure you give us a like, subscribe to the channel, GeForce TV, of course. Make sure you tune in for Race Rivals Race Chat this week with Clinton Jeffrey and Adam Ross all season long as well. Share all sorts of great stuff to talk about here on the channel. Of course, the Stickers and Scuffs podcast with myself and Graydon Bunn, who's been in the chat. We are interviewing all sorts of different names within Canadian motorsports, and we're definitely trying to expand So we want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We will catch you all next week on the NASCAR Pinty Series Power Hour. I am Cam K, and I have been your